we go. We're live. So please write this down in your notes, okay? Please write that. Please write that down.
Gary. The squaw.
So this is really important to understand, guys. I'm not kidding. If you don't know this, you're sunk. You have to know this. Really, it's really important. Up to this point, I have been very kind, and I have been giving you trinomials that can factor easily, right? There are trinomials that don't factor easily. And the process of factoring those trinomials that don't factor easily is completing the square. Okay, no, you're right here. Right here. And don't look to your right. Okay. Thorn. Yes. Were you saying something?
Oh, we should, like, for this class, we should just play soccer.
Right, we're not. I heard that before. We're not going to do that. That's actually harder on me than teaching this lecture. Teaching the lecture is, I think, the easiest for me to do right now. So completing the square. Now, I am going to actually give you ones that are factorable easily to practice at first, okay? Because the nice thing about completing the square is it works for everything. Notice, remember on all the other ones, the Gary's Terrific Trick? Well, technically that works for all of the ones that I gave you, it worked for. But if they don't factor, then it doesn't work for those, right? This works for everything, okay? And eventually I'm going to teach you another thing that also works for everything. It's a formula called the quadratic formula. So completing the square and the quadratic formula are really, really valuable to know, okay? At least to get through high school math. You've got to, you guys all know you have to at least graduate with Algebra 2. Many people will go significantly further. Some will go to pre-calculus trigonometry. Some will do calculus, right? But you have to, in the state of New Mexico, you have to get through Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2 if you want to graduate. If you want to graduate and go to college, that's it. You don't have a choice, right? And and that's the state's requirements. Depending on where you go to school for high school, they have their own requirements that are at least what the state's requirements are. Some schools require that you take 4 years of math. So if you pass out of Algebra 1 and you take geometry in 9th grade, then you take Algebra 2 in 10th grade, then you take pre-calculus trigonometry in 11th grade, there's not a whole lot of options for 12th grade except either calculus or you might, some schools offer a course called financial literacy. So if you find you really struggle with the pre-calculus trigonometry, you might be able to take the financial literacy, right? Which is a real easy course, way easier than Algebra 1. But my point is, a lot of schools require 4 years of high school math. And so anyways, yeah. So first of all, let's see what I mean by a square. If I had, I'm sure you guys know what a square is, right? If this was 2, what would this side be? 2. If this was, if this was x minus 2, what would this side be? Right, x minus 2. If this was x plus 2, I'll just do this, x plus 2, then they're both sides, all the sides are x plus 2, right? So let's sort of see, I'm going to first start with a factored problem, meaning x plus 2, well actually let's do x plus 3, because I'm afraid with 2 is one of those situations where you add 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 and 2 times 2 equals 4. I don't want you to get confused. I'm going to do x plus 3 times x plus 3, because that doesn't happen right now. Now, if I FOILed this, what would I get?
X squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9.
Okay. Everybody agree with that? First, outside, inside, last. Now what can I do with my two middle terms? Add them. So my final multiplied out version is x squared plus 6x plus 9. All right. Now, let's say okay, now, so you're all with me, right? Let's say I did this. Let's say I left a blank here for C. What do you think, how would you figure out, is there something, Henry, help, really focus. How would you figure out what C is? Can you see a pattern? You know it's supposed to be 9, right? You know it's supposed to be 9 because we just did it. But what could you do to find C? How does 9 relate to 6?
Because the two facts.
Yep.
Wait, say again.
Because
Keep
the
going.
two things that I'm going to in 6, I'm also going to 9.
So two numbers that add together, they have to be the same numbers, right? If we're talking about perfect squares. You with me? They've got to be the same numbers. So what's the same number? What time plus itself equals 6?
3, and then 3 times 3 would be 9. So
Exactly, right? This would be 3 plus 3. This would be 3 times 3, right? So that would be 9. All right, so you just figured out the rule, right? The rule of how to find C. You merely have to take half of B, that's a B, do half of B, meaning 6 divided by 2 is 3, right? And it's positive 3. You agree with me? Positive 3? Once I know that, I'm just going to circle that because that's going to be helpful information. All right, so write these down in your notes. Write this down in your notes, guys. Henry, please write them down. So, because you're going to need this. I promise you, you cannot do this your homework tonight, this weekend, unless you have these written down. You cannot. This is not going to work by osmosis. There's no way, right? So now, how would I factor this? Let me factor this again. Let's factor it again. What would it be? Factors of 9 that add to 6. So factors of 9 that add to 6 is 3 and 3, right? So I'd have x plus 3 times x plus 3. Everybody with me? I know this is review right now. But how could I write that without repeating it twice like I did? I've got an x plus 3 times an x plus 3. How could I write that? Could I write it like this? X plus 3 in parentheses squared?
Yeah.
Isn't that the same thing?
Oh, so then both sides of the square would be x plus 3 and x plus 3. And that would be your answer, right? That'd be a factor.
Well, yeah, well, almost. You got it. But, so, the beauty of x plus 3 written with a squared after it is that you can take a square root of it. What's the square root of x plus 3 squared?
It's x plus 3.
It's x plus 3. It's x plus 3. Okay, so this is, I haven't done the process yet. I'm just helping you understand why this is so valuable, right? Because normally I would have, if I tried to take the square root of this, what would that be? Oh my God, that would be a nightmare if I took the square root of this, right? I mean, I wouldn't even know what to, unless I factored it, right? Then in factored form, if it turns out this is a perfect square, because in factored form, it turned out to be the exact same number twice, x plus 3 times x plus 3. So suddenly I realized, oh, that is a perfect square. So I can factor it, and then I can take the square root of it, and I just get x plus 3. I don't have any x squareds and x's mixed up with each other like I do up here. So suddenly, this allows you to solve problems, and you'll eventually see why. Okay? So now that you understand that, can I erase? Let's actually do the process, and you'll actually see it in real life. So here we go. Let's say I gave you, well, let's just find C first. X squared plus 14x plus An unknown. What is C? What would it be?
7.
It'd be 49.
Would it be 7 or 49?
49.
49.
Right? 7 plus 7 is 14. 7 times 7 is 49. So you're doing half of B, and then you square it, right? You're going to square it. So 7, so it's positive 7, and then you're going to square it. That's going to be plus 49, okay? So that's how you find your C, yes. Good. School, class goes till 12:30. Oh yeah, okay, go ahead. Okay, so let's try another one. X squared minus 32x plus what? What is half of b? 16 plus 16 is 32.
Negative 16.
Oh, negative 16 plus negative 16 is negative
It
32.
would be positive 136.
And it would be like 256, isn't it?
Hold on, wait.
What's 16? I think it's 256.
Yeah, 256.
All right, so it's plus 256, right? Because we're squaring that negative 16, right? Are you taking notes, Henry? Because you won't be able to do the homework if you don't. Where? Right there? Okay, good. I'm pretty sure. So now you know how to find the C. So the first 6 problems on the homework are just finding C. Okay, there's no equal sign, okay? It's pretty easy, right? What if I gave you this, though? What if I gave you this? X squared plus 3x plus space. What would C be?
1.5.
You got to go half of b, half of the 3, which is 1.5, squared, which is 1.25, right? I don't know what that is. 1.5. 2.25? What's 1.5
It'd be
squared?
2.25, yeah.
Is it? Whatever it is. You know, it's going to be 1.5 squared, whatever that is. Right? I don't want to write the wrong thing. I think it's 2.25. But if I'm wrong, I don't want to write it. Because I'm not on camera.
2.25, yeah.
All right, so it's 2.25, so I could write that. Right, 2.25. So it's kind of a bummer when they become fractions and decimals. It's a little harder, but it's still doable, right? It was not that hard to find the C by just doing half of an odd number, and I use my calculator, right, to find the square. Okay, now you know how to do the first 6 things on the homework. Okay, you'll have them done in like 3 minutes, right? Now it's the next part though that you have to really pay attention to. If I gave you x squared, let me just think of one. Okay. So we could factor that if we wanted to. Factors of 1 that add to 2, right? 1 times 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, right? So I could factor that immediately. I know that I can, and all of these you can factor, right? But that's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to practice this technique using completing the square. Because eventually I'm going to give you ones that can't be factored. And you just have to learn the technique, and it's easier to learn them on ones that you can immediately tell if you got it right or wrong. See what I'm saying? Right? So here we go. This is the rule. We want to create, oh wait, hang on a second. X plus 1 times x plus 1. That's a bad example. That is a perfect square. Oops. Sorry. Okay, hang on. X plus, hang on, I got to do a different one. All right, so 3 times 5, that's, no, I can't do that here.
56 and 7.
Hang on. 50. Let's keep it simple. Let's do so how about 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. Okay, let's just do that. Okay, that's a pretty easy one. I know that those are not going to be the same. Okay, that's important. So this is not a perfect square. I know it because it's going to end up whatever. So I want to create a perfect square. You with me? Now, remember when I had a line for C and we had to choose C? That's what you want. This does not give me a perfect square. But I could create a perfect square with these two. Oh, shoot. Now I've got an odd number. I don't want to do the odd number either. Gary, we're going to change this again. All right, 2, 3, 2, 4 is, okay, 2 times 4 is 8. 2 plus 4 is 6. There we go. Sorry. Here we go. Now we're ready. Okay? So, sorry about that. So I want to have a space here for a C. I want to create a perfect square. So now you're going to do the one thing that I've told you never to do. I've told you always to make it equal 0. This is the only exception that I know of to this, is when you're completing the square. You are going to move your C out of the way because you want to create a perfect square on this side. So to move the C out of the way, I'm going to do minus 8, minus 8. You with me? Make sense? And so suddenly I have this. I have x squared plus 6x plus space equals negative 8. Now if I'm going to add a number, what do I have to do to the other side? I'm going to create a perfect square by adding a number here. I've got to add that same number to the other side. So, Henry, you've got to write this down, buddy. Truly, you won't know which way is up on this if you don't do it. This plus a space is equal to negative 8 plus a space. And what's in that space is the same number for both sides, right? So what's in that space?
So it's going to be plus 9, and then it's going to be, and then
Right.
it's going to equal.
Half of 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Positive 3. I'm going to circle 3 for a second. And I'm going to put 3 squared is 9. And since I added 9 to the left side, I'm going to add 9 to the right side. Okay, you with me? So now let's see what we can do. We have a perfect square on this side, which means I could factor it. So what would it be if I factored it? What would this be? X and X, right? You with me? You with me? Factors of 9 that add to 6.
Oh,
So it's gonna
x
be
plus
3 and
3x.
3 and 3. Ah, look at this. That's interesting. The number that I circled is what we're looking for. Right? It's 3 and 3. It's positive 3, positive 3. So I'm going to put plus 3 equals, what is negative 8 plus 9?
1.
1. Right? 9 minus 8 is 1. Okay. Now it doesn't equal 0, but that's okay. Right? So now, let's write this now, though, in, I know it's confusing. Let's just look at what we did.
So then
We
you're
took this, we subtracted C. We just move it to the other
No,
side.
I was talking about my notes.
Oh, your notes are
Yeah.
confusing. You get it, though. You understand what we're doing so far? All right. So now, let's write this with a squared instead of having 2 of these. Let's write it as 1. Like, we'll go like this. X plus 3 squared equals 1. Okay, you with me? Make sense? What can we do now to get rid of the square? Square root. So, but if I square root this side, I also have to square root this side. Okay? Now, there's a couple weird things. You got to watch this, guys. This now becomes x plus 3 equals, and this is where it gets weird. You have to put a plus or minus. Henry, you got to watch this, buddy. You got to put a plus or minus here. And what's the square root of 1? 1. Because think about it. What is when you're doing these?
Oh, because negative 1 times
Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Positive 1 times positive 1 is positive 1. So there's 2 possibilities. That's why you have a parabola, right? There's going to be 2 answers, right? There's going to be 2 places where it crosses the x-axis. So now we're almost done. We're like 99% done. I wanted to say x equals. So I'm going to have to go minus 3, And then I have x equals, and I have two answers. I have either -3 plus 1 or -3 minus 1. See what I mean when I say you won't
So it's gonna
be able to
equal
do this by
-2 or
osmosis? If you don't have this down, you won't know how to do it. So your final answer is x is either equal to -2 or -4, right? Are we on the, yeah, we're on. Make sense?
These are fun.
So they're fun. Once you get them, they're really fun to do. But in the beginning, they're a little confusing. Now, can I erase? We'll do another one. Is that okay? What? Okay, good. All right, we have time for one more. So let's do one more, just so that you see it. And this time, I'm going to do, okay, let's see, let me think about this. Let's see, let's say I do x plus 5 times x minus 5 times x minus 6. Maybe that'd be 11. So let's do x minus 7 times x minus 6. I like that one. Okay, let's try that. So, do I like that one or no? 7, I don't like that one. Minus 8. 6 times 8 is 48, and then 14. Okay, so we have x squared minus 8x, minus, what did I do? 14, right? 14x plus 48, okay, equals 0. Now sometimes you're going to see it like this. Some of the problems will look like this. I'll do the same problem in a different format. X squared minus 14x equals negative 48. Right?
Add 48, yeah.
So, right. So in the beginning, it's easier to just get everything equal to 0. Then you know what you're doing, right? And then you realize, oh wait, I want to create my own C. Does that make sense? So I'm going to move the 48 back over again, right? Even though I just moved it to the left, I'm moving it back again. So I'm going to subtract 48. Now I have x squared minus 14x plus space. Now this is always going to be a plus sign here. Always going to be a plus sign here. Equals negative 48 plus space. If you can memorize this part, you'll be home free, because the rest is just algebra. This is the part you just have to understand how to set it up, okay? I really recommend putting a line for the space, because then you kind of know what to do, right? So what do I put here? How do I figure it out? What's half of negative 14? Negative 7. So I'm going to write a negative 7, put it in a circle, and 90% of my students do not put negative 7 in a circle, right? And then they tend to get it wrong further on down. Put the negative 7 in there. You'll see why. And then negative 7 squared is?
Or 49.
Positive 49. So I added 49 to that side. I'm going to add 49 to this side. So suddenly, let's factor this perfect square. It's going to be x minus 7 times x minus 7. Look what I put in the circle. It's half of b, negative 7. That's what's going to be in this. So it's x minus 7, and I'm going to just do it. I'm going to do a shortcut. I'm going to immediately put squared. X minus 7 squared equals, what do I have on this side? 49 minus 48. 1. All right, so we're almost done. Square root. That gives me x minus 7 equals, what do I have to put here?
What?
Plus 1.
Plus or minus 1,
And then
right?
square root.
And well, but the square root of 1 is 1, right? So I was able to, sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes it'll be the square root of 3. Then you have to write plus or minus the square root of 3. We haven't gotten there yet. So I'm going to add 7. So x is either equal to 7 plus 1, which is 8, or it's 7 minus 1, which is 6. You with me? And so these tell me where, this tells me where it crosses the y-axis, right? Here's my thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom. It's a happy face parabola, so I know my parabola is going to look something like that. You see what I mean? Yes. So, fist to 5. You get it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.